and I am working as an assistant professor in Parul Institute of Engineering and Technology. Today we are going to discuss the topic as it is written on the board, speaking skills. Now, speaking powerfully and effectively is a skill which is worth learning, and because it plays a vital role in our professional lives as well as our daily lives. Whether we are talking with a colleague, client, supplier, or we are participating in a debate competition, or we are giving some speech. So we are discussing today, first of all, the first topic is the importance of speaking skills. These skills reflect and magnify your personality, confidence, and your worth. These skills enable you to impress people around you. Some people do not look special, but they prove their stuff and punch through speaking skills. By means of speaking skills, you can motivate a person, inspire a person, persuade a person, you can cultivate his interest in the desired direction, and you can above all mold a mind of a person. Besides these, we can see the use of speaking skills in other areas of our life. We can also boost the confidence of a person with the help of speaking skills. We can see people who like Gandhiji, Abraham Lincoln, Swami Vivekanand, who have impressed people by their speaking skills. During an interview also, not only your knowledge, but also your speaking skills are assessed. Even students always evaluate the speaking abilities of a teacher. In short, we can say that speaking skills are indispensable for a businessman, executive, manager, a student, a social reformer, a professor, an educationist, and for all those who want to compete in their or stand out in their professional or academic careers. The first topic that we are going to discuss today related to speaking skills is the types of speaking. And the first type of speaking that we are going to discuss is task-oriented speaking. Now, what do we mean by task-oriented speaking? That is related to the task. The speech that we do with people when we want to perform a particular task or assignment, that kind of speaking is called task-oriented speaking. Let's say, for example, you want to collect data for your project. So, you need to contact people face to face for that, or you need to contact people through telephone, or probably you need to attend teleconferences with people for various other reasons. Another example for task-oriented speaking can be when you are negotiating a deal with a businessman. The businessman is not your relative. You are speaking with him because you have a particular purpose. So the third example we can take for task-oriented speaking can be when you conduct an interview and talk to people for preparing articles in a magazine, or when you address people to motivate or persuade them. These are the examples that we can give for task-oriented speaking. Now, how do we explain task-oriented speaking in short? To summarize this point, whenever we speak with a purpose, that kind of speaking can be called task-oriented speaking. So, I would just revise the 4 examples that I have given. First example was collecting data for a project. Second example is interviewing somebody for preparing articles in a magazine. Third example is addressing people to motivate or persuade them. And fourth example is negotiating a deal with a businessman. In all these four examples, there is a commonality that the other person is not your relative, but you are talking with him for a particular task to complete or achieve a particular goal. Another example that can be given for task-oriented speaking is when you are inquiring about something to someone. Let's say, for example, you want to buy an LCD TV or you want a particular camera. So the questions that you ask to the shopkeeper for buying that LCD TV or a particular camera or a particular mobile phone, that is a particular task that you are doing. That means you have a particular purpose in that speech. Right? Then we come on to the next point, and that is second kind of speaking is interpersonal speaking. Now, what do we mean by interpersonal? The conversation that we do with more than one or two people, it is called interpersonal speaking. Now, task-oriented speaking and interpersonal speaking can be taken as opposite speaking, because as we see that in task-oriented speaking, we are talking with the other person because we have a particular purpose. But in interpersonal speaking, we talk with the other person because we want to build a particular relation with that person, or we want to keep alive the existing relationships. So, interpersonal speaking can be called relationship oriented, and task oriented speaking can be called purpose oriented. Now let's take an example for what do you mean by relationship oriented speaking. Assume that you are attending a conference and there are many people who are attending the conference right from the academic area to industrial area. Now if you want to create contacts with them, with those people, you need to create an impression on them. And if you want to create the impression, there are many other factors which in your speaking which will impact the other people. Those factors can be the way you address them, the way you use your voice, the tone of your voice. These are the factors that will develop your personality in front of other people. Now we will take examples of certain phrases and expressions that will help you in interpersonal speaking. Those phrases and expressions can be used when you are attending a conference, or when you are in a party, or when you are talking with many people at a time. Let's say, for example, you can count on me. I look forward to meeting you again. It is a pleasure talking to you. I can understand your feelings. I understand how you feel. I can see this matter is very important to you. These phrases and expressions can help a person to create an impression on other people. So we see that interpersonal speaking helps us to develop and sustain relations with other people, and it also helps us to execute the assignments which are group oriented or team oriented. Now there are certain examples that we can take of interpersonal speaking, and the first example can be conversations that you do with people. Second example can be counseling. Third example can be group discussions. And fourth example, which is related to group discussion, is team communication. These are the examples that can be included under interpersonal speaking. speaking. So the main difference that we saw between these two kinds of speaking is that here we have a particular purpose to achieve, a goal to achieve, and that is why it is called task-oriented speaking. In relationship, in interpersonal speaking, we want to build relations with other people. We want to create an impact on other people by our personality. That is why it is called relationship-oriented speaking. And these are the examples of interpersonal speaking. Now let's come on to third type of speaking, and that is semi-formal and informal speaking. Now, what do we mean by semi-formal and informal? I suppose many people know what do we mean by informal speaking. Now, let's come to understand what is semi-formal speaking. Let's take an example for that. For example, you are the production engineer of an automobile company and you are invited by one of your junior managers to attend a wedding, to attend his wedding. Now, the communication that you do with the junior manager, that communication will be termed as semi-formal speaking, because he is still your boss and you are at a different place. The only difference is that he is attending your wedding and you are not in the office. But the fact remains that you are his boss and he is your boss and you are his employee. And when that boss meets one of his schoolmates in your wedding, that kind of speaking will be called informal speaking, because that person is not his employee and you are his employee. The only difference is that he is attending your wedding. That is why that kind of relationship would be called semi-formal speaking or semi-formal relation. Now let's see certain differences between semi-formal speaking and formal speaking, plus semi-formal speaking and informal speaking. I would give you certain sentences which illustrate what is the difference between formal and informal and what is the difference between formal and semi-formal. Now let's first see the difference between formal and informal. So the first one is now we have used the same sentence here, but there is a difference in the use of words. One is this and another is this. Now this is the difference. This solution appeared to rectify the problem. The meaning of the sentence is that this solution seemed to be it seemed to us that this problem would be solved by this solution. So, appeared and rectify are formal words and seemed and fix are informal words. So, though the sentences are same, they are replaced by two words which have changed the kind of speech. That means one seems to be very formal and another seems to be very informal. Another example that we can take between formal and informal is they are going to prepare the script tonight. Now, we would make this sentence informal by replacing certain words. How? We'll write, they are gonna make the dialogue tonight. Now, though the sentence remains the same, we can see that there are certain words which have been changed. Which are those words? Are going becomes are gone. Going is changed into gonna because it is informal kind of speaking. Another is prepare is changed into make, and script is changed into dialogue. So there we can see that there are three changes in the speech. Now next we come on to formal and semi-formal. So far we have seen formal and informal. Now we will see the difference between formal and semi-formal. Before giving the examples of semi-formal speaking, difference between formal and semi-formal, let's take certain examples of semi-formal speaking. The first we have seen. The second example can be when you speak during official picnics, or when you speak while inaugurating a function at a place which is not connected with your workplace, or when you speak while shopping to your client. These are all examples of semi-formal speaking. Or when you speak to your employee not at the office but at some other place, that is termed as semi-formal speaking. Now let's see the difference between formal and semi-formal. So the formal is, do you want some coffee? Now we would change that to want some coffee. Want some coffee? Do you want some coffee? This has been changed to the question, the interrogation mark has been changed to only want. That means do you is dropped, and in semi-formal it becomes want some coffee. Another example that we can take is, are you going there? Now, this is formal. Are you going there? Because it uses an interrogation word or a question word. Now, we would replace this question word with only going there. The way we say it becomes a question, but we are not using a question word which is are you. Just going there. So the other person would get it automatically that we are addressing him. Thus, we saw the differences between formal and informal, and formal and semi-formal. So just to revise the three types of speaking, we saw task-oriented speaking, we learned interpersonal speaking, and we did semi-formal and informal speaking. And all the three kinds of speaking are entirely different from each other. because the first kind of speaking was related to a particular purpose. The second kind of speaking focuses on developing relations with people. And the third kind of speaking tells you the difference between semi-formal, informal and formal kind of speaking. And then we come on to our next topic, which is called another kind of speaking. That means besides these three kinds of speaking, a very important kind of speaking which we need to learn in our careers is called persuasive speaking. Now, what do we mean by persuasive or persuade? To persuade someone means to convince someone. And persuading is a powerful skill because persuading basically means that you are trying to convince the other person. You are trying to make him agree to your own views, which is very difficult to do, but some people have the art and skill to do that. Let's take certain examples of persuasive speaking. For example, you can persuade a learner, a candidate to join personality development course for 7 days. Or you can persuade a candidate who doesn't have the habit of reading books, but you can develop a spirit of competitiveness by persuading him and encouraging him to give competitive exams or to read books. Third example can be, let's say, a person who has in-depth knowledge of astrology, but he doesn't believe in expressing his knowledge to others. He doesn't believe in imparting his knowledge to others. So you can persuade him to take part or to give lectures in certain institutions, to become a freelancer, or he can even publish books. So these are certain examples which illustrate the word persuade or persuasive speaking. The second topic which is related to persuasive speaking is the qualities of a persuasive speaker or attributes of a persuasive speaker. Now, which are those attributes or qualities of the speaker? First quality is credibility. What do we mean by that? There are 4 qualities, and out of that, the first one and the most important one is credibility. Let's take an example to explain to you what is credibility. I would give you 2 statements, and these 2 statements, one statement is given by an ex-captain of India, and another statement is given by the manager of excellent technologies. The first statement is, though the Indian cricket team receives all the required facilities, but the quality of bats needs improvement. Now this statement is given by an ex-captain of Indian cricket team. The second statement is that the Indian cricket team receives all the required facilities in all the tournaments. This is said by a manager of excellent technologies. Now, out of these 2 statements, which is the statement that we would find more convincing? And obviously the answer would be the first statement, which is given by the Indian cricket captain. Because the credibility of the captain is more, as both the statements are related to cricket. So the person who has more right to speak on cricket would be a cricketer rather than a manager of some company. So my point is that we would be more convinced by the first statement because it is given by a cricket team captain and the statements are related to the field of cricket. That is why we can say that that ex-cricket captain has more credibility. Now, what do we mean by credibility? Or which are the factors which make a person more credible? So, the factors are intelligence, expertise, Third factor is knowledge, which is the most important factor. Then fourth can be sincerity, trustworthiness, concern for the audience. These are certain factors which makes a person more credible. That means if you are more sincere, if you are a trustworthy person, if you have more knowledge, if you are expert in your subject, these are the qualities or these are the factors that make you more credible amongst people. Then we can come on to the next point, which this is the first quality of a persuasive speaker. The second quality of a persuasive speaker is reasoning and evidence. Actually, this is second and the third point, but I have made it into second point, and that is reasoning and evidence. What do we mean by reasoning, first of all? Let's take an example for that. I would give you a statement, and the statement is, today's kids are better than yesterday's. Or second example can be, joint families are better than nuclear families. Now, if I am making these statements, do I have some evidence? Do I have some proofs which prove that joint families are better than nuclear families? If I have the proof and evidence, that means that I have the ability of reasoning. That means reasoning and evidence are both related to each other. You cannot reason without giving some kind of evidence or without giving some kind of what we call as supporting material. Both these statements are generalized statements, and when somebody is reasoning, he cannot give a generalized statement, he needs to give evidence. So our next point is, what kind of evidences we can use to persuade the listener? And the evidences that we can use is testimony. Another is analogy. Testimony, analogy, and third one is statistics. Fourth one is definition. Fifth one is examples. Now, definition and examples are very common and they are known to everyone, but these three would be our focus of learning. Now, what do we mean by testimony? So, we are on second point right now, and we are discussing the kinds of evidence that we can use while persuading a person. The first the first kind of evidence that we can use is testimony. What do we mean by it? Testimony are made by authoritative people. Let's take for example, what kind of remarks are they? Let's say the chairman of Steel Authority of India makes certain statements regarding steel production. Now he is an authority in the field of steel production. That is why his remark would be called testimony. Another example that we can use is, let's say Sachin Tendulkar says a statement regarding cricket, that statement or remark would be considered testimony. So testimony are remarks which are said by authoritative people, big profile people. Another example that can be given regarding testimony is remarks made by celebrity or a person who has written an article in a magazine. Even that author of an article or a magazine, his statements can be called testimony. So we saw three examples of testimony. One is remarks made by authoritative people. Second is remarks made by a celebrity who is not related to a particular field. Third example is an article written in a newspaper. The author of that article and his statements can be considered as testimonies. Second is analogy. Now what do we mean by analogy? Analogy basically means comparison, and analogy can make a point by showing how one idea resembles another idea. Let's take one example. In England, police are unarmed and guns are tightly regulated. Even in Japan, the ownership of guns is severely restricted and handguns are prohibited. On the basis of this comparison between England and Japan, what is the comparison? That in both of these areas, the ownership of guns or the use of guns or the use of armaments is very restricted. That is why the crime rate or the murder rate in England and Japan is very low. So, the persuasive speaker says that as the comparison between these two shows that the use of guns is restricted and the crime rate is low, in the same way we can reduce the crime rate in America also. That means we can use the same policy of using restricted number of armaments in America and we will achieve the same results as we have achieved in England and Japan. And the result is that the crime rate and murder rate is very low because Japan is almost a gun-free country. Now we have discussed testimony, analogy, then we come to statistics. I hope people know what is statistics. Statistics is numerical data which is used by engineers, scientists, business professionals because they want to prove that whichever statement they are saying that is correct and that is valid. That is why they show a numerical data to substantiate their arguments. To substantiate their arguments or to explain or elaborate their arguments. Then we come on to another last quality of a persuasive speaker, and that quality is called emotional appeal. So we have seen credibility and the factors of credibility. Then we have seen reasoning and evidence. That means no statement should be generalized. And the last quality, that is the third quality of a persuasive speaker, should be emotional appeal. That means a persuasive speaker not only appeals to your mind or to your head, but he or she has the ability to convince you by appealing to your emotions. Let's take an example for that. There is a speech called I Have a Dream, by Martin Luther King, who was a South African leader, and he fought for the cause of freedom in South Africa, in South America. Now, his speech has a lot of emotional appeal because that speech refers to the urge of freedom in people, and the urge to break from the shackles of slavery. The speech also talks about racial discrimination. The speech also focuses on the urge for equality in the speaker. And because of all these qualities, we can say that the speech has emotional appeal. Appeal, that means it attracts you, it attracts or it touches not just your mind but also your emotions. Another simple example that we can take is, for example, you want to convince your friend who is going abroad, but you want to convince them that you should not go abroad, you should stay in India. So you can convince him by appealing to his pride in India. So there are certain feelings that a persuasive speaker can evoke in a person, and those emotions or feelings can be compassion, fear, pride, as we saw right now in the example of the students, guilt, reverence. Reverence means respect for people, respect for anything. These are the emotions or feelings that a persuasive speaker can evoke in people. Let's say another example that can be given of persuasive speaking can be, you want to persuade certain consumers because they are not realizing their rights as a consumer. So you can persuade their sense of guilt. In the first example, we saw that one friend is convincing another friend not to go abroad and remain in India. So that person can persuade by giving examples such as, you can say that there are many facilities which are available in India. There are many courses which are available in India, and that can be done by evoking a sense of pride in your own country. After discussing the types of speaking, we would come on to another topic, and that topic is conversation. Till now we have seen we were focusing only on speaking. Now we would be focusing on listening and speaking both, because a conversation requires two people. One is the sender and another is receiver. And we would be learning two topics in the conversation part. Those two topics are, what is an effective conversation, and another topic is, who is a good conversationalist, right? And we'll be discussing 6 types of conversation. Now let's take an example of what kind of conversation is not appropriate, right? So the example can be that you are attending a conference and there is a break time in the conference, and you meet certain participants and talk with them because you want to build new relationship with them. Now you start talking to them and you don't speak much. You just make sounds like and ask them certain questions, and they are responding to your questions, and they are talking much about themselves, but you are not talking much about yourself. This kind of conversation will not be called a conversation, because it was not a conversation, it was just an interrogation. That means when you talk with those people who have met you in the conference, you were just asking questions to them, you were not conversing with them. Now what do I mean by this statement? That it is not a conversation. So we come on to the next topic by this statement, and that topic is what is a good conversation, or what do we mean by the word conversation, or what do we mean by it? In order to be a good conversationalist, you don't need to ask questions to the other person. That is just one aspect of conversation. But a good conversationalist always, first quality that a good conversationalist has is he reacts to other people. He gives some kind of reaction. He talks to other people. So a good conversationalist neither monopolizes the conversation and he is neither silent. He is not monopolizing the conversation. Monopolizes, that means you talk so much that you are not giving space to the other person to participate in the conversation. And he is neither silent. That means you are so quiet that the other person is not taking, you are giving more space to the other person. Now these are both extremes of a conversation. That is monopolizing and being silent. We have to be between this. Whatever is between this is a good conversation or is an effective conversation. Now what do I mean by my statement that you have to be in the middle of monopolizing and being silent? Being in middle of monopolizing and silence means that you need to talk to the other person. That means you should talk that much so that the other person doesn't feel that you are reserved. That means 25 to 50% of your talk should be, of the conversation should be done by you, so that the other person takes interest in your conversation. Second is, after talking, you should react to the other person, give certain reactions. Third quality is listen to the other person. Third quality is listening. Listening skills are very important when you are conversing with someone. And after listening, last comes asking questions. After asking questions, there is another quality that is left. Make comments on whatever the other person is saying. So we have seen in all 4 to 5 factors, or let's say qualities of a good conversation, and those qualities are one is talking with the other person so that you don't seem more reserved. Second is listening to the other person. Third is asking questions to the other person, and last one is making comments. Make comments. In the starting I said that conversation requires two people. One is a listener and another is speaker. So from that we end the topic by saying that conversation is a mutual process. What do we mean by mutual? We mean that it requires two people. It requires the interest of two people. That is why it is mutual. It is not one-sided, it is two-sided. Let's explain you this concept of what do we mean by mutual or two-sided. Everybody has the power of transmitting thoughts. Transmitting, that means passing on your thought from you to the other person. But conversation doesn't mean that you should only speak to the other person. You should keep in mind the reactions of the other person and then you should respond to the other person. That means you are not just transmitting your thoughts in isolation, but you have to transmit your thoughts keeping in mind the reactions of the other person. So here we saw what do we mean by an effective conversation, and another quality that we saw is who is a good conversationalist. So to just summarize the topic, we saw two key points in conversation. The first key point was that best conversations are exchanges, not interrogations. You are not conversing with people to ask questions to them, but you are conversing with people, you are listening to them, you are talking to them, you are making comments on their topic. In that sense, it would be called an exchange. And the second key point which we should learn in a good conversation is that it is a mutual process. That means we have to keep in mind not just our speaking, but we have to keep in mind the reactions of the other person also. Now we come on to another new topic which is related to conversations only, and that topic is called types of conversation. Types of conversations. Which are those types? The first one is chat, which is an informal conversation between friends. Let's say you're chatting about the upcoming cricket match, or women are chatting about their husbands. This is called, very informal conversations are called chat. Then we come on to another one, and that is called dialogue. Dialogue are conversations which are given in a book, a play or a film. Or a dialogue can also be a formal conversation between two countries when they are trying to end certain disagreement or when they are trying to resolve certain problem. Third kind of conversation can be, which is a French word, it is called tete-a-tete. Tete-a-tete means, it is a French word. If you translate it into English, it is called head to head. Head to head conversation means a confidential or private conversation. Fourth kind of conversation is parley. Fourth one is parley. That means when a formal discussion between enemies, when the war is stopped for the time being, for taking the injured people out of the field, at that time the war is stopped for the time being, and that conversation which is done at that time between enemies, that kind of conversation is called parley, and this kind of conversation is a formal conversation. Second kind of conversation is, fifth one is colloquy. Colloquy is a formal conversation, very formal conversation. Let's take for example, two countries are discussing on the topic nuclear disarmament. Nuclear disarmament means that two countries are discussing how they are going to restrict the use of weapons in their countries. That kind of conversation, which is very formal, and very formal words are used in that, which a layman cannot understand, that kind of conversation is called colloquy. And the last one which we are going to learn is communion. Now what do we mean by communion? It's the most profound and the most deepest of all the conversations conversations that we have learned, because other conversations require words. We require words to converse with the other person in other kinds of conversations, let's say chat, tete-a-tete, parley, dialogue. But in a communion, we don't require words to converse with the other person, because we are connected to the other person not by using words but by our soul. Our soul is connected with the other person. We feel that we have a deep or profound relation with the other entity, and this kind of communion can be with God, it can be with nature. So you are conversing with God or you're conversing with nature, but you do not need words for that. Even without words, you can converse with the help of your soul. Okay, so thank you. This was my presentation on speaking skills, where we discussed about the types of conversations. We discussed which types of conversations, and they are the types of speaking, interpersonal speaking, task-oriented speaking, semi-formal and informal speaking, persuasive speaking. Then we saw the attributes of a persuasive speaker. Then we discussed what do we mean by conversations, what is an effective conversation.